Hey everyone, before we dive into the episode, I just want to give you a quick reminder that supporters of the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon get access to patron-exclusive Q&A episodes and mini-episodes. For instance, we're going to record an episode on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I think is going to be an interesting, cathartic episode. So if you'd like to hear the episode and other exclusive content, head to our Patreon. The link is in the show notes. And now, on to the show. Hi, I'm Michael, and this is Beyond the Screenplay. Today we are talking about Inglourious Basterds, and I'm joined by the Lessons from the Screenplay team, writer Trisha Arand.
Hello, everyone.
Writer Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And editor Alex Calleros.
Hi.
So, Inglourious Basterds, we're going to talk about it, and we're probably going to have to talk about a lot of Tarantino, just because you can't talk about one Tarantino without talking about all the Tarantinos.
Yep.
The Tarantini.
The plural of. Yeah. But the Inglourious Basterds video was interesting because it's kind of, the most like scientific video that I think I've done. And looking at, I remember wanting to like, in my aspiration to create the grand unified theory of storytelling and screenwriting, I remember thinking like, I need to understand emotion. Like I want to find a psychological paper that explains what is actually happening in our brains when we're experiencing emotion. And I happened to find this paper on tension and suspense that like plugged in really well to one of my favorite scenes, which is, the opening scene of Inglourious Basterds. That's kind of why I got so excited about it and spent so much time on that video. But the Inglourious Basterds is interesting because when I think about it, I think about it in like snippets. Like there's storylines of it that I'm like, oh, that's Inglourious Basterds. And then when I've sat down to watch it, I forget that there are these other subplots happening. And I'm wondering if you guys have that experience also with this movie.
Well, I mean, it's divided into chapters. So it does sort of have that like very intentional feeling of it has, or movements, I guess you could say, in sort of like more musical or symphonic sort of way, where it does feel like it moves through these very distinct phases. And so I think that sort of feeling, and of course it has these amazing long set pieces too. And I think that's what you're like sort of getting at and describing, because like how, the opening scene of this movie, which you did your video about, is one of the greatest things. Like, and Tarantino has said it's his favorite thing that he's ever written, right? It's amazing.
It's probably his best work.
Right.
Like it's just so
well,
good.
I feel like at the end of this movie, when Brad Pitt says into the camera, this is my masterpiece.
Exactly.
Or
I mean,
I think is whatever he says.
Yeah.
I kind of agree. Like, I think Inglourious Basterds may be his masterpiece, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I hate him for knowing that and for saying it right before his name comes on screen, but I think it is true.
I mean, he did spend 10 years on this movie, like just on the writing of this movie. And so there's that sense of, I mean, obviously everything he does with like a high level of craft. But I agree with you in the sense that like it has these very distinct movements and each one of them feels as carefully crafted as the next. And so when you're like sort of isolating one, it's pretty easy to do because there are these larger sort of set pieces. Like the scene in the tavern is its own, like you could do just a video, just a study on that, as well as you did on the opening scene,
I think the original, I think I was planning to do it on that scene actually, because I think that is also one of my favorite scenes, but there's so many more pieces that it's more complicated and more difficult to illustrate the point with that one.
Yeah, totally.
It's so good too.
Yeah, I feel like mathematically speaking, it's impossible not to remember certain parts of that movie more than others because some scenes are 20 minutes long and some scenes are 2 minutes long. So of course you're gonna, you've spent more of your life watching like and La Petite.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think for me, watching the movie again, I watched it again last night for the first time in years, and it just reminded me of what a masterful cinematic experience it is. I mean, there's parts of it that I'd like more than others, and there's Tarantino things that bother me, but it's undeniable that there's just such a level of craft, as you said, Trisha, at work here, and it's just I think it's a really remarkable movie that I want to revisit more often because it just on every level of acting, cinematography, set and mood, and it works on so many levels. I just love it.
Well, it's gorgeous.
It's really gorgeous. I forgot how well it was shot.
Well,
I mean,
even just think about that opening sequence with its autumn. in this like rural French countryside. The trees are incredibly beautiful and crisp and everything. It's like the atmosphere is so well captured. The landscape is so beautiful, and yet he manages to imbue it with so much like menace. It's so good. And throughout you see like the way the cinematography is, it's this just like epic, huge shots of really isolated people and like splotches of light and color. And it's just really, really pretty to look at and also horrifying. And so like being able to hold those two things, I mean, it's stunning.
It has a maturity to it,
Yes,
I think.
absolutely.
That even films made afterwards don't have, in my opinion. I feel like it's his most mature film in a lot of ways, which is maybe why it's my favorite of his.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like it's, in the works of Tarantino, if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of the first of his kind of like
latter day.
Well, yeah, the like looking at parallel universes of like what if stories. And it's just kind of interesting that there was a point where it seemed like suddenly he shifted and like that's the thing he's going to do now. But yeah, it's then interesting thinking back on his early films and how, he has always had this kind of ability to create tension and put the audience like play with the form in ways that make you unsettled, but like usually delivering in a really like cathartic, interesting, explosive way that I feel like came to such fruition for me also in this movie, because I think it's used to serve a narrative that I was really interested in and that is grand in scope, but like yet you connect with all the characters, you know them all intimately in a really interesting way. So yeah, I agree. I feel like this is definitely my favorite Tarantino film.
And by setting it when and where he sets it, the stakes could not be higher.
Yeah, right.
It's just the tension is so incredible because it's the highest stake situations imaginable. If you have any historical knowledge of what was happening at that moment.
No, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up something that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on, which is just what is the benefit / value / just how do you guys feel about the sort of fantasy history kind of sub genre, just sort of being like, what if we, shot Hitler in the face a whole lot? Because it's like on one hand,
yeah.
Right. On one hand, it seems like a dumb idea, but on the other hand, it's like so cathartic, and so like, yeah, why not? Why do you have to like stick to real history to make a silly movie? I mean, I say silly. I feel like most Tarantino movies are pretty silly, even if they're not.
They ultimately end up being pretty silly.
And this movie was criticized for being silly and for being like taking. Well, actually, this movie was like praised in sort of its like cathartic silliness, but then immediately after this he made Django Unchained. People didn't like that. They thought that was too silly. I'm on board with that, but that's a whole other thing I want to talk about. Totally.
But I do want to get your guys' thoughts on just the idea of this sort of alternate history
revisionist history stuff.
Revisionist history.
I don't know, Michael.
I mean, I feel like that was my hesitation going into Inglourious Basterds. Like, I remember seeing the trailer for it and kind of like rolling my eyes of like, oh, it's Tarantino. And the trailer is very like actions and guns and like murder and violence and blah, blah, blah.
Also Nazis.
Right. But I think that's kind of, what I was impressed by with it is that I was kind of swept up in this like once upon a time, like in World War II kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That like, it made me buy into an idea that I think I would kind of agree that is kind of goofy. Like, I think if someone just kind of said, like, what if the past didn't happen the way it did, but it happened this other way that I imagined? I feel like that's a hard sell. That's a thing I wouldn't be on board with. But I think for some reason, this movie, I think, pulls it off in a way that I think I've come to feel is the exception to the rule. That pulling it off is a tricky thing.
Well, I think for me, I can understand the aspect of the kind of cathartic revenge for historical grievance, like being expressed through a cinematic work. I like that idea. There's something interesting about that. On the other hand, I'm not personally ever very satisfied with like revenge as a thing, especially when it's kind of done uncritically and kind of in this lewd, like boyish, like schoolyard way, where, you know, even the trailers for this movie, I was turned off by a bit because they do focus on Brad Pitt's speech, basically being like, we're going to scalp the Nazis. I want 100 Nazi scalps. I want, like, you know, it's all about basically.
And I want my scalp.
Exactly. You know, that's the big like tagline moment. I'm like, okay, great. But I think with all these kind of revenge fantasy alternate history movies, I don't understand exactly what he's saying, or if he's saying anything, when he kind of marinates in the like extreme like revenge violence and spelling out just how almost we're gonna match the oppressor's evil with like as grotesque and evil, and it's gonna be fucking awesome, you know? Like that's like the Tarantino thing, and I don't. What is he like? What is he doing with that? Does he actually just genuinely believe that? Does he think it would be freaking awesome if we could be Nazis to the Nazis? Like, or is he trying to say something? And if he's trying to say something, I don't get what he's saying. I don't know.
I have a lot of thoughts. The thing is, truthfully, I don't think Tarantino thinks about it in those terms at all.
Right.
Like, that's the whole thing. I think. And I'm only basing that on things that he's actually said.
Right.
Which is like, people have asked him that exact question basically, and he's been like, well, you're missing the point, which is that violence is entertaining. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, I'm not joking. Look it up.
Fascinating.
Yep.
Okay.
And so like, I think those are incredibly useful questions to grapple with. I think we absolutely should grapple with them. I do think the specific circumstances of Inglourious Basterds and World War II and the Nazis, I mean, look, for basically as long as film has been around, we have had the Nazis as villains because there's something about the way that history has been written that enables us to cast the Nazis in this universally despicable role. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it's convenient.
Right.
It's very convenient.
It's incredibly convenient. And so like, it's funny, we've been working for 6 months on a Casablanca video. But like which
8 hours a day, every day,
all day.
Yeah.
No.
It's gonna be amazing.
You guys. No, but the reason that it's given us so much trouble is that the specifics of Casablanca are so unique to the time period. They're so unique to the situation. It's like, well, you have this incredibly compelling love triangle, but the reason it's so compelling is because it's specifically set during this time where it felt like good and evil were as black and white as they've ever been, and they've never been as black and white as any other point in history. And again, I wasn't there, but like, that is how it is portrayed in cinema, and to take any sort of other grayer stance on it is not acceptable. And again, not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, for Tarantino to pick something like this, and like, he is obsessed with revenge all the time.
Obviously.
We've seen it like throughout, but like something like Kill Bill, something like, I mean, basically literally all of his other movies.
All of his movies have revenge.
All of his movies have revenge, but they're never as neat and clean as this.
Right.
In a lot of ways. And so this is a movie that we can sort of like get behind and laud, where shooting Hitler in the face a lot is like still kind of a thing where we're like, yeah,
right,
yeah, all right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because for all the World War II movies there are, they don't end like that.
Right,
know?
Exactly.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I think you touch on exactly my feelings too, of like why I think this movie works is because the bad guys in it are universally the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like, if there are few things that humanity as a whole can like agree on, and like basically everybody can agree, Nazis not good.
Well, and just
Hitler bad.
Hitler bad.
What the Nazis did is the most
Evil.
Unforgivable, imaginable thing.
Right.
So it's like,
and there's been lots of other cases of terrible things happening, but like you were saying, Trisha, in cinema especially, this is kind of the one we have that like there's a shorthand.
Nobody
here.
disagrees. Well, maybe now they do, but
well, and historically though, there is something very specific, again, not to get too much into the weeds about history necessarily, although we might as well under the circumstances, but there is something about World War II, because it was sort of the first war where they brought in the cameras and there was like film, because film is such a young medium. This is really the first war that was captured on film. There's some footage of World War I. We have photographs of like the Civil War and stuff like that. But like when they discovered that the concentration camps existed, somebody was like, hold everything, bring the cameras in here. And let's really film this and let's really see what it looks like. And that was sort of the first instance of this happening. And, to Germany's credit, there's a lot of remembrance culture in Germany where there's like a lot of most of those concentration camps are left standing. And fifth graders get bussed out to them and they go and see them. And so like there is a very well preserved legacy of this particular thing. And so that I think is part of what undergirds all movies that have Nazis as villains, from like Indiana Jones and onward, but like especially Inglourious Basterds, where it's like, okay, we get it because we actually are young enough to remember. We as a society are young enough to remember, but also we've taken the care to remember.
Right. Yeah, we've actually bothered to remember because there's a lot of atrocities that
plenty
are
of atrocities
not culturally widespread
that we didn't get on film.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He starts from there, and I think what is also great about Inglourious Basterds is that within the text of the film, we get to experience like specific like acts of like atrocity that we can like. We see Hans Landa kill the people under the film. Like that's
in the opening scene.
That's the opening scene. Like we already like dislike Nazis, and now we have this very specific relationship to this character within this film. And I feel like he does that really well with kind of all the characters, where like each time you're jumping between a chapter, oh, okay, cool, we're catching up with these people and this is what their mission is. And there's this, it's kind of this really fun, I feel like this is what you would want from any kind of film like this, where there's these different chapters, but they all kind of come together in a really nice, satisfying way.
I realized that upon watching it last night, how much it all comes together because some of the other movies don't come together in that same satisfying way.
Right.
You have these chapters and they kind of just have their own thing and they kind of just end or languish. But this movie feels tight in a way that other Tarantino movies don't for me. And it's tight while still doing all the Tarantino things we want, which is these long extended sequences that aren't afraid to stretch the tension out for 17 pages. But it still feels like a movie. You get that really satisfying conclusion.
Well, I will say that like the one thing that bugs me about, so I'll call it say like latter day Tarantino, which is like Kill Bill and later, is I think Kill Bill's the biggest. I know a lot of people love Kill Bill, so I apologize, but like I think it's the biggest perpetrator of this, which is just like it is 18 different kinds of movies all at the same time. Trisha used a word to describe Hot Fuzz as tone confused. And I feel like that's something where it's like Kill Bill, you're like, oh, yeah, like there's like blood spurting out of people and it's hilarious, but like also like she was raped a lot and like, it's so like what is happening? And I feel like and I think Django Unchained is a really good example of that. It's like, why is there like hip hop music suddenly like at the very end? Like if you're going to do that throughout your movie, cool. But like, why don't wait till the last like 20 minutes to do it? And I feel like he does a lot of that. And Inglourious Basterds definitely has a lot of that. You have like the Hugo Stiglitz montage where it's like, now there's like rock music playing and Sam Jackson's narrating. It's like, wait a minute, this is the movie that had the Hans Landa scene a second ago. So it bugs me because I saw this movie before it actually came out, a screening with Eli Roth at USC, which was interesting.
Wow. We were all shocked that you did that, Brian.
Right. And which was funny. Eli Roth, someone was like, so was Harvey Keitel playing like the wolf? And he's like, what, like a time traveling version of the wolf from Pulp Fiction? He's like, no. He's like, Sam Jackson also wasn't narrating as Jules Winfield.
No. Which, although like,
universe.
Yeah, I was gonna say Tarantino's been very clear to like he's building a universe. Like,
right.
That's true.
Right.
And is happening very consciously. All the characters have like the last names of like characters that come later in time, and it's tiring. But
yeah. So I think something, the first time I saw Inglourious Basterds, I was like, like I love all the things he does really well, and then he gets so goofy sometimes, and that is what's weird about the last act of the movie is like now he's taking these like very different tones and putting them all into one movie theater together, and I think for that he does it pretty well. We've talked about this with like the Avengers movies too, where it's like you have to take these very different feeling movies and now put them in one movie together. So I will say that like for as much as that element of latter-day Tarantino bothers me, I feel like Inglourious Basterds is one of his best in terms of keeping it fairly balanced, even if he does kind of do some stuff where I'm like, you zoomed into the bombs on their legs with like the peephole thing from cartoons, and like you told me who's in like a 2+ hour movie, you like point at people and like put text on screen, which he also does in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm like, is that the most efficient way as a screenwriter to like give the audience information? Be like, I'll just put text on the screen that says what's going on. Like, okay.
Yeah, those like circles in the later part of the movie where it's like, here's Goring. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, here's an arrow pointing at him. Thank
Right.
you.
It's that thing where it's like, I've just come to expect it from him. So it's like almost weird if that didn't happen. It in some ways, Inglourious Basterds is remarkable for how restrained it is for how much of the movie.
Sure.
Because that's
Totally.
part of why I like it so much, is that there's stretches of it where I kind of forget I'm watching a Tarantino movie. It just feels like a great classic movie.
Right.
Yeah, the goofiness is kept to a minimum.
And I feel like the range is established early on. Like, I feel like as soon as you meet the bastards, it's sort of like, oh, okay, this is like the goofy part. Like, this is where that kind of thing is going to happen. And I feel like that's also consequently why those were my least favorite chapters. But I think then it sets the expectation that like this is within the reach of this movie. It can go these places. And I think it kind of worked to be, introducing this idea of a parallel history, like having those moments of levity kind of, for me anyway, kind of let me ease into the world. And like, we can have these serious, like very powerful imagery happening that's changing the course of history. But like, it's okay to laugh also, because Brad Pitt is terrible at speaking like an Italian person. Or
that is a great scene.
Yeah,
Gorlami.
Like,
I love Brad Pitt's like comedic performances.
It's really good.
Like
so good.
another Tarantino movie, True Romance.
Yes,
he just plays like the like super stoner in that, and
I love True
Burn
Romance.
After Reading.
So good,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We've all seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and we will not spoil it in this episode.
We will spoil it in
Later.
our mini episode, which we're going to record also.
Which we're itching to talk about.
We are very much.
As I was watching it, I was having the thought that I have in every Tarantino thought, which is, or in every Tarantino, oh boy.
In every Tarantino thought is another thought.
The inception of thoughts. The thought I have in every Tarantino screening that is, if Tarantino's name was not on this film, and if the actors were not A-list actors that are like assigning it credibility, would we respond at all the same way to these movies?
I love that as a question.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I think the Melanie Laurent storyline in this movie, the Shoshana storyline, I would respond to. That storyline has me from the get-go. One of my favorite moments in the whole movie is when she breaks character in the restaurant scene after he leaves.
Yes.
Just like so good.
So good.
I feel like there are pieces of this movie that would meet that requirement for me. And then I do think when it's all depending on you being super excited for Brad Pitt giving a badass speech and Eli Roth, coming out with this bat and like the awesome music while he beats somebody to death, like I don't know if I would respond to that if it wasn't Brad Pitt and Eli Roth kind of winking at each other. And I don't know.
I mean, that's an interesting. I want to come back to this thought in a second, but you talk about tension in the video, and I think the biggest thing about tension is you have to pay off your tension, and like the Hans Landa thing pays it off. The tavern scene, you could argue that like for how quick the like action is at the end, that like it's like it could be more, but I feel like the Donnie Donowitz scene is a perfect example of like the tension doesn't pay off. It's like, oh, here he comes out. He's like, he knocks it out of the park. And it's like, oh, it's just like a whiny guy. Like, and I think that's part of the point. But yeah, it's just sort of like we're building up this like really cool tension. And then like, no, we're back into like cartoony Tarantino mode, if that makes sense. But anyway, you were saying.
I think for me, it comes back to character. Like, regardless of whether or not Tarantino created this character, if the character itself textually is well constructed, then I think we're still going to be invested. And I think that is exactly what works with the Melanie Laurent storyline. All we need to do is see her running out of there covered in her family's blood, like running for her life, and we're with her forever at that point. And so like everything she does is like just weighted by that scene. And so, you know, her whole storyline is going to be compelling from that point on. And that itself is what like undergirds that scene with tension where you were talking about, where she like breaks at the end, where you can see that it's like literally all she can do to hold it together that entire time as she's like sitting across from the person who killed her family and trying to just get through this strudel. But like,
Right. Well, and I think
wait for the crime.
I think what's so compelling about her, all of her scenes, is that she's living in Nazi-occupied Paris,
right.
and she's all of her scenes she's interacting with Germans and with Nazi, and just her character is so well constructed, and how she decides to present herself, and
right. her storyline is so heartbreaking when you've already seen the movie, you know, because I'm just like, don't give him the time of day, but also like forget about even, you know, what your real identity is. Like, it's just, you can't say no to these guys,
right,
you know? And it just makes me so uncomfortable. And then knowing that she like eventually kind of gives him the time of day, and then eventually at the end kind of maybe feels a little sorry for him. And then like that, and I'm just like, oh, it's so hard to watch.
Well, but in earlier drafts of the script, she was a much more like active rebel. And so she was like conducting like sniper operations and doing like other things and like more actively resisting the Germans during her stay in Paris. And I think it was quite late in the screenwriting process that they were like, that's not realistic. Like, she would lie as low as possible. She would try to stay out of it as much as possible. And then to have her dragged in the way that she's dragged in, because you really get that sense of like, she's not actually out for revenge. She's not.
She sees an opportunity to end the war. You know, that's why her story is compelling to me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Her whole character isn't this one-dimensional revenge machine.
Right.
Yes.
You know, she's actually a character that makes sense in the world.
That like I empathize with, where I'm like, that's what I would be like. I wish I would be as good at doing what you're doing as you are.
And she's so smart, and she's like, we're gonna make this work. We're gonna figure out how to make this work, and we're gonna end the war. And
but she's very much thrust into that position. It isn't one she goes seeking out, which I think is really important for her character in order to be like realistic in any way.
And I think also helps earn the kind of parallel revisionist aspect of it. Where like, because we're so invested in her, it's like I'm okay going along with like, okay, cool, she gets to find a way to end the war. Like, emotionally, that is what I want.
And her revenge is the revenge that is cathartic for me. You know, watching her, you know, filmed performance on the screen and burning up in flames, like that's a Tarantino revenge fantasy image I can get behind. And then I'm less engaged when you've got the Inglourious Basterds guys just machine gunning people or running for the exits. Like, that's less awesome to me than, you know, the Shoshana character laughing as the theater goes up in flames.
Listen, if you've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, stick around. There's some obvious parallels here.
So many thoughts coming.
Okay. But Michael, go ahead.
I was actually just reminded when you were saying, Trisha, about the multiple drafts of the story. This is a tangent story, but randomly in a previous life shooting interviews with sound designers, I shot an interview with the sound designer that Tarantino works with a lot. And kind of between, you know, takes and rolling and stuff, he was saying that he once was on a private plane with Tarantino flying from somewhere to somewhere else.
Sure.
And it was a long flight. And he said Tarantino just started telling him the story of Inglourious Basterds. And it took the entire like multiple hour flight to finish it. But that it was like in his mind, he has like 12 hours worth of movie of Inglourious Basterds. And he told him all of it. And so when it came time to make the movie, he somehow had to like, you know, bring it down to just these like couple hours of thing. But there's just something that's interesting and has always stuck with me is like Tarantino, of course, is someone that has 12 hours worth of movie of what these other characters are doing at any given time and blah, blah, blah.
I feel like you can kind of feel that, you know, in his movies.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because his characters are so well drawn most of the time. And they come into these little short films with so much life behind them that he must have thought of their other adventures and where they come from.
I mean, think about La Petite in the first, few moments of this.
Also, that actor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God. But sorry, continue.
The casting in this one was freaking great.
Trish has it written
down. I'm going to say it wrong because he's very French. Denis Menochet. I'm going to go with that. Amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
His like you were talking about with Shoshana's breaking character kind of thing, like when he finally says, you know, you're housing Emmy the States, aren't you? Like
God.
the way he responds, the way he says yes twice in a row is just like so heartbreaking because he's a great actor, obviously, but most of the time he's playing it very stale faced. So it's like when he finally knows that it's up, like just the everything underneath just going, you know.
Michael, maybe you can like talk us through a little bit of the video in case people haven't watched it recently. But just like the kinds of tension that are undergirding that scene.
All right, that's 3 undergirds. You're off the podcast for this.
Okay, fine. The kind of simmering beneath. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so luckily I rewatched the video so I can kind of remember what I talked about in it.
Great.
But I think, yeah, there's so much. It's like hard to know where to start. But I think the moment I kind of always go to now, I feel like I've developed kind of this like magnet sense to midpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the midpoint of that scene is where you reveal that the family's under the floorboard.
Yeah.
And that recontextualizes everything. And I remember being in the theater when that happened and just like you could feel the audience like react and tense up in that way. And I feel like kind of like I talked about in the video, that's kind of where it moves from tension to suspense. In this paper that I was referencing, tension is where there's stability, and then it's moved to you're moved to a state of lack of stability, and that's what happens in the beginning, where we see the farmer and they're on the farm, they're having the normal day, and then Nazis show up, and that destabilizes things really quickly. And then suspense is a more specific, you're dreading a specific outcome. And so at that midpoint, when that shift happens, suddenly we're moved from tension to suspense, and it kind of rejuvenizes the scene because now, you know, it's making us at the same time reconsider everything that's come before, because now, you know, we know he was lying and we understand the stakes a lot more. And we now like know the terrible potential outcome. And I feel like, as I say in the video, knowing that we're watching a Tarantino film just amplifies that so much more.
It's probably going to go south.
Right. Like, it's going to go bad.
It reminds me, you know, you talk about in the video Hitchcock's bomb under the table, you know, have a conversation and then have that same conversation, but show the audience a bomb under the table and it changes everything, which literally happens in the theater scene. And forgive me, I think I may have talked about this on the podcast before, so forgive me if I have, but the mid-season finale of the last season of Breaking Bad, or the end of the 5th season, depending on how you qualify things.
We have not talked about this in the podcast, so go ahead, Bri.
It's a scene, I won't spoil anything about Breaking Bad, other than you're going to know something's coming because it was like, there's a year before episodes. It's like the family's out in the deck having dinner or having lunch, and everything's
like a very
really
calm
happy.
Pool party.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like in the same way you say, because you know you're watching a Tarantino movie, for me, it was the bomb under the table was literally just knowing that there were 5 minutes left in this season or half season, however you qualify it. And that was, it was so stressful for me to watch this totally normal, nice thing going, there's no way it ends like this.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, the like the meta awareness that comes when you know too much about story of like, everyone's really happy right now. Like there's no conflict. There's too much smiling.
I'm worried.
Something terrible is about to happen.
It's the Indiana Jones rule. Every time he smiles, you're like, nah.
Well, and I feel like we have gotten into this in private conversations before, and then our No Country for Old Men podcast, which is like, I love that podcast. That was the first one we ever recorded, and you can listen to it if you become a patron, but like our sound went wrong, so like our sound is not good on that podcast. But we talk a lot about the Coen brothers and sort of their similarities with Tarantino, which is just that if you have any sort of like filmic knowledge, you're coming into this from a different place than like a lay person who doesn't. And so that's exactly what you guys are talking about, which is like, I watch Tarantino movies and Coen Brothers movies basically through my fingers or just like sort of really tensed up. I mean, I was sitting in the theater on Friday night watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I like had my hood over my head. So it was very cold in my theater also, but I was like, had my hood over my head, and I was like sitting as close as I could, like crunched in my chair, just like ready to cover my eyes at any moment. And largely because I was like, I'm in a Tarantino movie. And so like, I don't trust anything that's happening. And Tarantino as a filmmaker has been clear that that's something he has tried very consciously to cultivate. Like anything can happen in his movies. That's something he has wanted to freak his audiences out about, basically, which the ironic part of maybe I won't. Once upon a time in Hollywood.
Well, and in a Tarantino movie too, when the thing happens, you might see somebody's head get crushed, or like it might be
or
like
way worse.
Like Hateful Eight has a lot of like, okay, he just showed me that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking this was a conversation, but I wasn't, because I'm in a Tarantino movie, so I was always aware someone's head could get crushed.
It's such an interesting aspect of like filmmaking that is like so relevant to such a few number of filmmakers.
Yes.
It is interesting because it is such a part of it, and kind of even just thinking about the Coen brothers as you were talking, like I feel like watching No Country for Old Men, there's suspense because I feel like anything can happen. Like I feel like anything's on the table, but I don't know where it's gonna go.
Right.
Where I feel like with the Tarantino thing, I feel like as soon as there's dread, I know where it's going to go, and it's like a different kind of flavor of tension.
Like somebody's head is going to be crushed on camera for sure. It's just like whose head and when.
I will say one of the most upsetting scenes, because it was hard to predict what actually happened, one of the most upsetting scenes in Inglourious Basterds is the one where Landa chokes out Bridget von Hammerschmack with his own hands, because she's totally screwed going into that entire scene. Like, because we know he's found the shoe, we know that he knows it's her, and so like, but just what exactly he's going to do is super unpredictable, because we've never seen him in this situation before.
Go ahead.
No. I know what's happening now. Like, I rewatched it recently, and I was like, I know that he's about to jump out of his chair. His entire countenance changes, which Christoph Waltz is just like, we should talk about it for a minute. But
I mean, undeniable.
Especially for someone who's been so calm and collected the entire time. If you look at the next scene, he basically lets the plan happen anyway, which means he just wanted to kill her. He just wanted to. He was like, you know what I'd really like to do right now?
It's so crazy. The way that he just jumps out of his chair and latches onto her and just kills her right there. That's one of the ones where, like, the tavern scene, at a certain point, you're just like, okay, everyone's getting shot. Which is what happens, right? Like, so everyone gets shot.
Which is sad, because I like Michael Fassbender in that scene.
He's so good.
He's so charming.
Well, old boy.
He's so British.
This is how we go out. I hope you don't mind if we speak the Kings. I love it. It reminds me of like T.E. Lawrence, or like if you guys have seen Dr. Strangelove. Colonel Mandrake, one of Peter Sellers' many performances in that movie.
I love Michael Fassbender's performance in this. Like, it's so layered because he did grow up in Germany. So like, he is affecting a bad German accent. So like, his German accent is actually perfect. But he like is making it worse somehow in that scene, which probably only German people appreciate, right? So, and like that scene where the other officer calls out, like, I know you're from Hamburg, I know you're from Frankfurt. Like, that's true. That's where those actors are from, because that's the German they're speaking.
That's one thing I really appreciate about this movie too, is that it's heavily subtitled, and all the characters speak the language they would be speaking in that moment. And even in the opening sequence, when they switch to English, it's for a reason. Yeah. He doesn't want the people hiding under the floorboards to understand what they're saying. Right. Yeah. So there's never a switch to English just for like our sake as the audience not wanting to read subtitles. It's subtitled when it needs to be subtitled, and it's in all the languages that are appropriate for those characters in that moment.
Yeah, I think they were saying it's like only 30% of this movie's in English.
Yeah, like, I love it. I love it.
I think that's a really interesting point that, I hadn't thought about until, you were talking about that, Trisha. Like, language is such an important part of this movie. And I feel like it almost, again, lends a kind of an authenticity to the revisionist aspect of it, because it feels so much more real and authentic than any World War II movie I've ever seen, because there are long, like, entire scenes that are like subtitled.
There's not Germans speaking with English with German accents, in the Nazi headquarters.
Right. Or, oh my gosh, there's so many like weird, like Troy, where
very historically accurate.
But like make it like Last Temptation of Christ. All of the Romans are British actors, and all of the Israelites, I guess, I don't know what like the right term is, are American actors. And it's like, okay, like you made a choice. Troy every single character in the movie is from 2 different cities, and every actor speaks with their own Scottish or Irish or whatever. And then Brad Pitt speaks with like some invented dialect that I don't know.
Yeah, his voice is pretty weird in that movie.
Right. Tom Cruise in Valkyrie, because it's like another movie where you just have like these British actors.
Crimson Tide, which is a submarine movie that I love, is like Sean Connery and like
Hunt for Red October.
Okay, but I was going to say that's a good example
because it does the really interesting
like
It's like we're going to tell the audience we're changing gears here,
right? And like dollies in, zooms in on their mouth, and it switches from Russian to English, which confused me as a child to no end because I did not understand what was happening.
You took it very literally.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what?
No, I really appreciate this movie for that exact reason, which is just like the moment where Diane Kruger, Bridget von Hammersmark goes like, you Americans, I suppose none of you speak any languages other than English. And they're like, no, we definitely don't. Like, and you really went to the trouble to cast people like Fassbender and cast people like Christoph Waltz, who have incredible command of the language. Christoph Waltz speaks 4 languages very easily. And it's so insane because that part is so realistic and so like I was gonna say well observed, but it's more than that. It's like it's historically accurate. And then you have also just like total insanity where you have alternate universe, goofiness. Like all this, goofiness.
Yeah. But then it also like you cast Brad Pitt as the guy who can't do that.
Sure.
So then it like,
but Brad Pitt actually speaks German.
Okay, sure,
like,
but
yes,
point is like
he does. He speaks German very well.
Oh, that's funny.
Like
probably with an American accent.
Well, yeah, but not like that, like thick Tennessee, like mountain man accent they gave him in this movie. Obviously not.
But it's just so funny.
No, I agree. Like,
which I feel like is also like literally the reason they like went with it, right? Wasn't it that like they were at a table read and then Brad Pitt just like whipped it out and everyone cracked up and Tarantino was like, that's your accent for this movie.
I've heard that legend too, but also Tarantino's from Knoxville. So you have to assume there's some like, because eventually,
maybe Brad Pitt knew that. And like
maybe.
Yeah. That's something I think about also when watching this movie is directing a scene with people speaking a language that you don't speak.
Right.
Like, what?
Which he didn't bother to learn. Like, Tarantino did not bother to learn his lines and the way they sounded in German or the way they sounded in French or whatever. He just kind of trusted that the actors were doing it.
Right. Which I think is cool, which I think is maybe like the right way. I don't know. Yeah. Like it's interesting thinking of directing a scene where you don't necessarily like, what they're saying, but you can't understand what they're saying. But in some ways, maybe you're even more focused on the emotion and the minutia and you're not, encumbered by like, are they saying these words right or hitting all the language exactly right? Like,
well, I think part of what's such a pleasure for me watching this film is, yes, I'm reading the subtitles, but I'm also just watching their faces and listening to the tone of their voice and just even the rhythm of the words that are not in English. And it's really pleasurable. Like it's the performances and the way the words are spoken is just inherently like nice on my ears and my eyes. And I think I think you could argue that, he maybe just focused on everything else but the meaning of the words, and it comes through on screen as far as...
He's also he'll have conversations with the actors about how to say certain things and that kind of thing, I mean, something that bugs me to no end when I watch foreign actors whose characters are foreign and English is not their first language, speaking perfect English. And it really bugs me. And I think like Tarantino actually handles it pretty well, but I think like watching The West Wing, for instance, it's like there'll be Ian McShane is playing a Russian guy who's like just here for a bit and can speak every word of Sorkin dialogue. And it's like, that doesn't feel real. It feels like somebody speaking dialogue written by an American. And I think it's more compelling to me when they're like, I don't know what this word is exactly, but and it's something that feels like when you do talk to somebody who, and again, like if you're talking about Landa, like Landa has like a really strong command of these languages. Fine, you can have him say anything you want, but that's not how all characters work, Well,
it's funny because my friend who I introduced the Before trilogy to recently, he's a foreign language speaker. He was born in Iran, and so English is a second language for him. And he sometimes didn't believe the kind of sentence structures that Julie Delpy would get into. You know, these very like almost like advanced, like poetic English language sentences. He said did not strike him as like, this is your second language. They seem like she was saying a sentence written for her by a native English speaker.
Like in the car scene Before Sunset, she says, it stirred shit up. And it's just like, it's one of those idioms that's like so specific. You know, it's not to say that like a foreign person couldn't know that idiom, but I feel like that's when it stands out to me the much when someone is, or stands out to the much. That's when it much
Are you
stands out.
English second
Much,
language?
much.
When it stands out to me most is when a character says something that feels like it's, you only say that because you've heard your friends say it growing up in America for 20 years and not, you know, but again, it's like you can't argue that any given character couldn't have heard that phrase.
Yeah, maybe her character does know all these idioms.
Sure.
Because it's weird because I feel like that's one of the things I like about Before Sunset is that I feel like she was saying things in a weird, like I feel like there were also moments where she says things in a weird sentence structure. Where
a lot of
that
times
is
she
a weird
does.
way to
a lot
say
of times
that.
she does, and I've never had that thought about it before. I just thought it was interesting hearing from them.
Well,
that plugs in.
Yeah.
you know, the thing is, most of the people in the world speak English as their second language. And so, like, it's funny.
Sorry, most of the world.
Sorry, most of the world. That's our fault. But, like, you know, it's really interesting. I watched a fascinating movie recently that was made last year that's set in, it's a movie called Transit, and I really recommend it. And it's set in, like, let's pretend that Nazi-occupied Germany continued until now. Right, essentially. So it's set in 2019 time, but it's like the Germans are just now taking control of Paris or whatever. And so like it's a really interesting sort of, you know, dystopian idea of a movie. But you have people from all over the world that are there in this, like in Paris, in this fictional Paris of 2019 or whatever. And you have people from Eastern European countries and people from like the Middle East and everything. And they're like, oh, do you speak German? No, I don't. Do you speak French? No. Do you speak Japanese? Nope. Do we all speak English? Yep. And they would just like talk to each other in English. It's not any of their native languages. And like, yet that is the reality the world over, truthfully. Like English is being spoken in all kinds of places where native English speakers aren't present. And so that, like, we don't sort of see this as much in Inglourious Basterds, but to some extent where like Londa is not a native English speaker and neither is La Petite, but like here they are. It's a language they can speak in common because La Petite doesn't speak German, you know? So I feel like there is a certain verisimilitude there that functions well, you know, and again, like, regardless of what I think about English, I also think it's really valuable to have movies. We should read more movies, America. Like, like
I love subtitles.
I love subtitles.
I love not missing things. I love like getting every ounce of information I'm supposed to get, you know? It's
and also the original actor's performance. I don't want to hear some overdubbed.
Oh, no, I can't do dubbing. Yeah.
Yeah, we are so like spoiled where basically because a lot of our entertainment is manufactured here and it's American filmmakers and whatever, that we get to listen to people speaking our native language all the time. And we're just so spoiled.
And we can travel most places and they'll have to speak our language and we don't speak theirs.
Exactly. Like, it's so funny.
Thanks, Europe.
I was in Mexico last year and I went to the movies on like a Wednesday evening. And I was there to watch an American movie and they didn't dub it. So it was like the actors performing in English and there were subtitles in Spanish so that this Mexican audience could enjoy it. And so I was like listening to it and everyone around me was reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it was a Wednesday night. The theater was packed out and everybody was vocally responding to this movie. And I was like, we should be better at this. And I love that Inglourious Basterds challenges us in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I think that really, I remember, again, being in the theater and I feel like there was this kind of intense focus in the audience. I think enhanced by the fact that you have to pay attention. Like you have to read.
Yes.
Or else you're going to miss what's happening and no one wants to miss what's happening.
Right.
Can I throw in a weird little side note?
Absolutely.
I saw...
Is it a snide side note?
A snide note, yeah. I'm speaking in English. I saw The Two Towers for, I think, the second time, but my mom's first time in Mexico with my mom, who is a native Spanish speaker from Uruguay. And Treebeard shows up and he starts talking, and my mom laughs. And I asked her later, so what were you laughing at? And she said, so tree in Spanish is árbol, and beard is Barbara. So Treebeard's name in the subtitles was Barbol.
Oh, no.
And I was like, how cool that my mom was there to like pick up on that little like portmanteau of words that they put together.
That.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Yeah, the whole like dubbing subtitle thing is really interesting. And Alex and I worked on a movie at one point that was all about dubbing and dubbing around the world. And it was stressful because editing a documentary is hard. But it was really interesting learning about how all the different cultures, how they have different approaches to subtitles and dubbing. And in some places like Italy, dubbing is like the thing. It's like a very deep cultural history for them.
Yeah.
Like, dubbers are like stars there. Like,
Right.
the voices of George Clooney or big actors are
Right,
known.
Yeah.
It's called Being George Clooney.
Yeah, it's called Being
That's
George
why I said
Clooney.
George-
I've seen that actually. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
We
cool.
edited it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can I get your autograph, please?
It's on many airplanes, I've heard.
Oh, okay.
We're really cool.
Can I get your autograph or have someone else say your name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good someone to dub lessons from the screenplay moving forward.
I do, real quick though, I do love watching The Simpsons dubbed in other languages because you have people trying to just like, Homer. It's like someone trying to be Julie Kavner. Like,
That's probably the most fun in the documentary is watching like Seinfeld be dubbed into like German and like all these other examples of our comedy trying to be translated to other languages.
Right.
And like
It's pretty weird. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that in this movie, because it was distributed worldwide, that a lot of these actors were able to dub themselves. So like Christoph Waltz dubbed himself in like 4 languages for the international distribution of this
It's like
movie.
flipping the language. Yeah.
And
there are examples of actors who like always do like their German or their whatever.
Yeah, and Daniel Bruhl is a fluent Spanish speaker, and he dubbed all of his Spanish like subtitles and things like that. So
That's cool.
it's really cool that like it wasn't. I mean, no one would accuse it for as long as we've been talking about it. No one would accuse it of being a gimmick anyway, but just that it was able to be so translatable. Although it is interesting, they did run into a lot of problems in Germany because Nazi symbols and like Nazi sort of iconography, all of that is heavily restricted in how they can be like displayed in
tricky.
Germany. And so like even though the film itself was not edited to be distributed in Germany, the poster
marketing.
art, all of the marketing had to be very heavily edited to like get all the swastikas out of it, basically, because you can't display those things in
Interesting.
Germany.
Yeah. I mean,
Again, remembrance culture. Well done, Germany.
Yeah. I had written a piece on Inglourious Basterds several years ago, and I just remember as I was taking screenshots, I was like, some of these are going to be visible on social media. Some of them are just going to be visible in the article. So I actually, even though nobody told me to, I just became very careful about being like the header to the article was Emmanuel Shoshana like sitting in the window during the David Bowie montage,
it's so good.
with like the Nazi flag like in the background. I was like, that's such a beautiful shot, but I don't want that to be like the Facebook, banner or whatever. So it's weird.
The context.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being worried that the video was going to get flagged. In general, YouTube doesn't like it when you talk about Nazis. And so I'm kind of surprised that it's been fine and it's the number 5 video on the channel.
Right.
Thanks YouTube for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the context is pretty clear.
Yeah.
So talk about
YouTube isn't always really good about context.
Right.
But,
I mean, it's clearly educational, though. Like, and this is, I feel like we haven't even done anywhere near justice of like really diving into why this movie is so educational and instructive from a screenwriting perspective, which it definitely is. So
you tell us about that when you talk about your lesson.
What you learned.
Oh, my lesson. Are we getting into those?
Should we do that?
Okay.
Well, hold on. We have 2 things I want to talk about.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Go, Brad.
All right.
First a quick one, which is my least favorite shot in the movie, and I just want to point this out
All
because
right.
I feel like it's like when writers and cinematographers like battle, and I think in Tarantino's case he's both, but not that he is the literal cinematographer. I'm going to say the thing now. It's the shot where one of the daughters is putting up the laundry and puts the clothespin on, and then she hears the cars, and instead of looking around the piece of laundry, she takes the clothespin out and moves the thing because there's a camera behind her and it's going to be a really pretty shot. And it's just one of those things where it's like, I just picture the cinematographer being like, well, if we did this, it would look really cool. And I'm thinking about it from like a character perspective. Like, why would you ever, if you needed to look somewhere, not move your head?
I think I'm more on the DP side with this one. I really
agree.
like that shot.
I like that shot. And Bri, have you ever actually hung laundry on a clothesline?
Yeah, I think so. When I was a kid.
No.
Yeah.
No, because it's like the thing is like it actually is so much easier because of the way that I looked at it again, like when I was watching it recently, and I was like, the way that it's laid out, if you keep it clipped there, you really would have to almost walk around the end of the pole, which is like
She
so
could
much
grab
more.
the clothes and just pull it.
I'm gonna side with Brian here on this one. I feel like that is. It's not that I think it's.
Stay tuned for our
bad.
extra mini episode where we argue about
Just this one.
clothespins.
The logic of clothespins.
I do feel like that's when it starts to be like, okay, and now I'm in a movie. We're in constructed mode.
Right.
But I'm okay with that sometimes. If it's that pretty, I'm okay. I'm just saying show me a pretty movie.
And Tarantino, listen, Tarantino doesn't want you to forget that you're watching a movie.
Well,
that's the thing.
That's for
Right, but
sure.
I want me to forget that I'm watching a movie. That's why Tarantino and I are at odds sometimes.
Okay, well, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So thing number 2.
Yeah,
which
that was the short
so
one.
that was okay.
Okay.
No, just we talked about Christoph Waltz's performance, and I love, like, first of all, the bad guy who is like so, like, at any moment he might rip your face off or whatever, but also just like that era, it was like the golden age of villains. Basically, you had like, I mean, even if you count like
Anton Chigurh.
Yeah, Anton Chigurh, Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men, Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, who's like a protagonist but still pretty villainous. Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, even Meryl Streep in Devil Wears Prada. Like, it was just like, for like a 3-year period, that was just like the best performances, and honestly the best performances of the entire decade.
Agreed.
Were these villains. And yeah, I think that like Christoph Waltz was one of those ones where you're just like, Daniel Day-Lewis or Meryl Streep being great at what they do is not surprising, but this guy you've never heard before just being like, holy crap.
He was new to American audience.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
But it's true. It was like one of those performances where it's like afterwards you're like, who was that?
Right.
Like, because he is a star now. I want to see him in everything.
Yeah.
That award season was my favorite, where he was like tailoring all of his Oscar speeches to like be sort of subtly about the award he was receiving. So like when he won the Golden Globe, he was like, in this world, in this globe, in this like sphere, like, and then when he won the Oscar, he was like, in this like galaxy, in this industry, in this like whatever. He just did like this.
He's
really
like, I'm just a small golden man. But
it was just like every single one of his speeches was so well written because he knew he was gonna win.
I feel like that was one of the seasons where it was like so obvious that it was just like, he's going to win all the things.
Right, but I love those seasons where like I know that someone, like, it was the same with
he
Javier
deserves
Bardem
it
in No
so
Country
much.
for Old Men.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it is a landmark performance. We will, be talking about this for years. And so like, it's not hard to predict they're going to win. And like when it is, it's so deserved, and to see it graciously accepted. And like, obviously Christoph Waltz was also like accepting in various languages, whatever. He did his thing.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a joy.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, why don't we go around, talk about the lessons that we're going to take from Inglourious Basterds. Alex, do you want to start us off?
Sure. One of the lessons I learned and have been learning and have been thinking about a lot lately in my own writing is just how to make things worse, for the characters always, and make things basically impossible.
Yes.
And then make them even more impossible. And this, most Tarantino movies are good at that, putting characters in pretty impossible situations, and then it usually ends badly or in a really insane way. And this movie is just a great example, that underground cellar bar scene.
Yes.
Just the way he keeps like turning the screw and making it worse and creating obstacles, and now the accent's wrong. Now he can tell this. Now he held up, the wrong fingers for saying the number 3. Like, just he came up with so many ways that this thing could go wrong, and then like methodically let them all happen in the right order, that it's always intensifying like what deep shit they're in, basically.
Yeah, totally.
You talk about like stretching the rubber band.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
but I think one of the important things too is it's also the intensification, the escalation of the problem. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
there's kind of like the smaller problems of like, oh, maybe he's from, this weird mountain region.
Right.
That's why but then there's things that are less and less excusable. And it just,
Yeah.
he manages to build like the step ladder to the climax that is just so well constructed. And I think often, in my own writing, sometimes I go for like, oh, this is a really bad conflict and it's gonna be really hard for them and it's really intense. But it's probably like actually like a 3 out of 10 as far as like how
Right.
bad it could get. And it's actually kind of scary to think about how bad it could get because you don't know
Right.
how to get them out of that situation. But I think Tarantino challenges us to think, no, how bad could it get? How could it be to the point where, Brad Pitt doesn't know Italian at all, but Londa does know Italian fluently. You
Yeah.
know, like what is the worst thing that could happen? Let's actually do it
Yeah.
and see how they get out of it.
Right.
And I feel like Tarantino, especially, like his movies are a world in which sometimes they don't get out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So like he
Yeah.
can really have that freedom where like they don't get out of the bar alive.
Right,
Like,
right.
It is an impossible situation ultimately.
Right,
Yeah.
because it is still really compelling, even when he like drops into English and like is like, I'm gonna keep drinking this scotch and I'm gonna speak English now. But and like we all know the score and we all know we're gonna die here. But it's still really tense and compelling at that point. Yeah, but I feel like in addition to that, there's like these stair steps of like, we're gonna make it worse. Then we're gonna like level it off where it might be okay. Then we're gonna make it worse.
Right,
Then
yeah.
we're gonna level it off.
That's the
Then
other
we're gonna
kind of
make it
dynamic.
worse, right?
It's the ebb and flow
Yeah.
of like, maybe we're going to make it. No, we're not.
No, we're not. Yeah.
And I feel like his scenes are long enough that you have to have
Exactly.
those. Like
Right.
you have to be taken on multiple
Because you become
waves.
numb if it's
Right.
just, it's true. If it's just getting worse constantly,
Right.
you just numb yourself because you're like, well, I'm preparing for the inevitable end.
Which goes back to that opening scene where there are moments where we think Lapidita's gonna get out of it.
Right.
Mhm. Like he's so close. He
He's
seems
so,
like he's
he's
so
so
close.
close at
Yeah.
different
So
times.
close.
to
But he
getting out of it.
probably never was.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you realize at the end.
Right,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
I also love in the tavern scene watching the actors give such nonchalant performances, knowing that they're terrified.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Brian?
It's something that we talked about when here I go mentioning Terry Gilliam again. We talked about from a style perspective, like there are certain people that I really like their work, like Terry Gilliam and David Lynch, but I constantly am going, but would this not have been better if you just did it more professionally and adult and sort of grown up, where you have like a Fincher or a Nolan who like they're masters at making a really sharp, crisp movie, whereas other people sort of make whatever they want, and then you kind of have this back and forth of like, okay, you've got your quality moments that are like some of the best filmmaking I've ever seen, and then you have your moments that are so silly and goofy it completely takes me out of it. And I feel like that's my struggle with Tarantino and like Robert Rodriguez during that same time when they were both making kind of movies together almost. And it's like I'm watching Inglourious Basterds and the next couple of Tarantino movies going, but can you just make a straight movie that doesn't have all your you stuff in it? And then I see, well, and then fast forward to 3 days ago, when I see Once Upon a Time in
Yikes.
Hollywood, which we'll talk about soon, but which doesn't have a lot of Tarantino-ness in it. And I just found really
Hard
boring.
disagree.
Oh, okay. Well, we can talk about that in a second. But
Yeah.
but I just felt like, oh, now I'm just bored. Like, and I think that's so the interesting lesson. I don't know what it is, but it's like find the balance between what is you and what is sort of quote unquote correct or objectively. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
is a sort of like balance between how do you make what people will call sort of objectively a good film, but also inject enough of yourself into it that
Plot twist. Everyone loves Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I know, but
Not everyone.
but eject enough of
Yeah.
yourself into it that
Subscribe
it
to
feels like
Patreon.
Right.
that it feels like something that's uniquely you. I'm done.
I mean, no, I think that's a really interesting point, and maybe at some point we can dive into it. But that's how I feel. That's how I feel about Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
And I feel like I also wonder how much of it is like when you get on board the train, like I remember
The Darjeeling Limited, you mean?
Oh, Brian.
Oh, I love it. The Grand Budapest Hotel. I feel like as you were talking, that's what I was picturing. Where for me, it was like Wes, like just can you just make a movie? Like
I
not
love
everything.
The Grand Budapest
and
Hotel.
Everybody loves the Grand Budapest.
It's because it's great, Michael.
I think it's probably his worst.
But okay, hold on.
I was pretty bored during it.
Let's talk objectively for a second, because
Yeah.
I feel like if Royal Tenenbaums or Life Aquatic or something is Wes Anderson's Inglourious Basterds, then I feel like something like Django or Grand Budapest is the doubling down. And I'm saying that from an objective perspective, not from a whether or not you
think that's
like.
a fair comparison.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think with
so much to talk about.
with any artist, there is that feeling of like, here's what people like about what I do. I'm just going to do a lot of that now.
Right.
And okay, if that's not a fair comparison, it's not a fair comparison. But Grand Budapest Hotel for sure is Wes Anderson being like, what if I went full on Wes Anderson right now? And I think we can all at least agree on that.
I don't disagree. And like, I have very, very similar feelings about Tim Burton, because I feel like basically Tim Burton has become a parody of himself.
Absolutely.
And like, he can only make the most Tim Burton-y movies possible now, and can't scale back anything. But I don't think that's true about Grand Budapest, but I think that's a very specific example. But that's not what this podcast is right now.
Right.
What did you learn, Trisha?
I learned a lot about characters having secrets.
Ooh.
Which is sort of a lesson we hear in like film school, you know, like give your character a secret, whatever. In the same way that people are just like, give your character a problem. You're like, okay, great. Conflict, do a thing. The secrets in this movie they are what create the tension. And the fact that we, the audience, are let in on the secret, and the actors and the characters are put in the position of having to perform. And I think that this is something that is like sort of a thread that runs throughout Tarantino films, which is like someone has to perform a thing, and we, the audience, are aware they are performing. And so we get invested in how well they are able to perform and needing their facade not to break. Because if it does, the entire scene devolves into violence, right? And that's particular to Tarantino movies. But like, I was recently rewatching Reservoir Dogs, and they were talking to Tim Roth's character, where they're just like, you have to be Brando, you have to like perform this thing, and they do the whole like monologue of like, you have to learn this monologue, and you have to learn it so well that it is true, that you did live it, that it is this thing. And this movie really builds on that sort of idea of characters being performers, and the more that audiences realize that characters are performing, again, so like, we don't necessarily understand when Michael Fassbender, we as Americans, when he holds up three fingers, and we're like, why suddenly now they realize he's not. But we do realize some kind of fatal mistake has been made in the performance part. And that goes down to the secret. And so having these secrets that underlie the scene, we don't know that going into the scene with La Petite at the beginning, but we do know that midway through. We know the secret. And so the more that you can sort of create that, I feel like that is like sort of masterful suspense work that we see here. And so I have no idea exactly how I'm going to apply that to my own writing, but I love it.
Secrets are good, I
Secrets
think.
are good.
Yeah.
Secrets are fun. Is that the saying? Yeah.
Well, I think that ties in nicely to what I've decided is my lesson in this moment, which is, that I'm always fascinated watching movies, kind of tracking the management of information. And I kind of talk about this in the Ex Machina video, but like, if you want to be hardcore objective scientist about it, like, movies are just information being conveyed to an audience, like one frame at a time. And I feel like one of the things I did kind of enjoy about watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was I feel like Tarantino is really good at managing information. And that goes to what you were saying of like secrets, like what are the character secrets? When do we learn that they have secrets, etc.? Like he's very, it's almost like Fincher-esque. Like I feel like Fincher is very concerned with information and like, here's a close-up of this thing and here's a close-up of this thing and this reaction shot means this. And Tarantino is not afraid to do that. Like so much, I feel like of watching Inglourious Basterds is the reaction shots and watching people betray things or are monitoring, trying to, is this, we cut to this person and they're kind of keeping track for us of how well this other person's performance is going. Right. And I think that's what I'm continually impressed by with this movie, is that it's just, there's so much information that, 20-minute scenes worth of information, but each moment is designed just right to give us exactly what we need to have the emotional reaction that we need at any given moment.
Yes.
So.
And to keep a 2-hour plus movie feeling taut and like it's moving.
Right. Mm-hmm. Which is also a side lesson about just discipline. And I feel like discipline is important. And if you get too big, you might need people to discipline you.
Right.
Yep.
Not talking about anyone specifically here. Okay, what have we been watching this week? Really quick, let's go around. I'm gonna start because I have a thing.
Yay!
That
Michael watched something.
I watched the
really?
thing. I watched a lot of things, but I'm gonna go with, I finished Broad City, the TV show. And Broad City kind of crept up on me. Like, I think Alex, you recommended it.
Yeah, I mean, I was a huge fan early on with Broad City.
And I watched it, and it felt like a thing that was very much not my style of comedy. And like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I kind of came to really love it and miss it when it was gone and welcome it with open arms when it returned. And so they just finished their final season a couple months ago. It ended up being a really interesting kind of portrait of millennial life and this kind of late 20s. It's very New York, but the way it's done, I think, is very universal. Some of the comedy is kind of distasteful. They're just not my taste, but I feel like it ultimately gets at really honest, interesting aspects of life that I feel like I haven't seen reflected anywhere else. And I think their voices, Abby Jacobson and Alana Glazer, I feel like they are voices that we need, and I'm very happy to have had these past several years, and they wrapped it up in a really, I thought, really nice, deft way. So
nice.
Broad City.
Oh man, I gotta finish it.
It's good.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. Trisha?
Yeah, I am gonna say the real thing that I've been watching lately, which is something I've actually watched before and it's not new. But I have one of my best friends and I are rewatching for me the TV show Roswell, which was I know.
CW, it was a WB.
It was a WB.
Before
It
CW.
was a WB show, 1999 to 2002. It's on the WB.
It's like Sexy Aliens,
It
right?
is like Sexy Teenage Aliens. It is a garbage show. I love it.
I have a good friend who has like the DVD set.
I love it so much. Like, so I watched it when it was on, and I obviously was a teenager at the time. And recently I was like telling someone about it, one of my best friends, Billy Dawn, and I was like, BD, we have to watch this show. You will love it. It is trash. It is the best trash. And so we started watching it again. And honestly, it is fascinating because it took place over a really sort of tumultuous time in history, obviously right at the turn of the millennium. And the show takes some really, it was sort of like X-Files influenced, and it also Buffy and like those kinds of things are baked into it. But they take some really big risks where like there was a point where we were watching last week, it's a 3-season that show, but it was like back when seasons were 24 episodes. So it's like
right.
a lot.
It's like the OC.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just like thinking about it in like terms of being in a writer's room now, I'm like, God, that's so much. Oh, that's a lot of writing, actually, for just 3 seasons. But they take some risks that I find off-putting, and of course, that's where Katherine Heigl came from. She came from that show. Colin Hanks also got his like big start on that show.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It's a weird, not great, pretty like adolescent, but just popcorn, cotton candy, watch it, tap into your teenage self kind of a show. It's on Hulu, so you can watch the whole thing on Hulu. So it's been really fun.
Awesome. Alex?
This past week was Outfest in Los Angeles, which is
Yeah.
like the LGBT film festival. And I was like, I now live very close to where they were having the screenings at the Chinese theater. So I'm like, I'm just going to go and see some movies. So I went to a film like a week ago, and in line I met the director of another film that was playing there a week later, which is like a fun thing at film festivals. Really nice guy, and he directed a movie called Tu Me Monk, which monk, I think it's like a French phrase, but he's Bolivian, and it takes place in New York, but he's a Bolivian filmmaker. And it was just a really interesting like you were saying, Trisha, we need to see more foreign films
We do.
more things in other languages. And
Yes.
the film has some English in it, but it's mostly in Spanish. And it was just a really good reminder of, we're such a bubble here in LA as far as like gay people are everywhere. We like own this town. It's like gay is everything. But
we're actually in West Hollywood right now.
We're literally in my apartment in West Hollywood, which is like gay Mecca in LA.
Yeah.
But, this was an extremely personal story by this Bolivian filmmaker, and Bolivian culture is very conservative when it comes to LGBT rights, and it's very religious, and suicide is a huge problem with Bolivian like gay youth. And so it was just a good reminder of like, okay, there are still like a lot of places and a lot of cultures that need these stories, because it's still like dangerous to be gay. And
absolutely.
And and suicide is such a huge problem in these communities, because it seems like there's no other option. So it was a really very touching film, obviously very personal to the director, and it was really nice just to like see a different kind of movie that wasn't of our coastal bubble.
Do you know if it's being distributed, so where we can see it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's in the festival circuit right now, so it's probably in that pre-distribution phase. But I think it'll get distribution. It was very well shot, very good acting.
Can you say the title again?
Tu me manques, and there's an actress in it who has been in some Almodovar films. I can't remember her name right now, but she might be a way to find it.
Is it on IMDb?
Probably.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should
go to IMDb, go to Almodovar films, look at all the actresses.
Find the actress. Yeah. I mean, it's spelled T-U is one word.
Great.
M-E is the next word. And then Manque is M-A-N-Q-U-E.
Oh.
So it's
and we'll
French.
put the title in the show notes also.
Yeah.
So you can
Anyway.
read
Does
it.
that mean I miss you?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
There's also real quick a documentary. I think you can watch it on YouTube that Stephen Fry put together called Out There, and I think it's about 2 hours long, and it's about homosexuality across different countries and societies and everything. And he actually travels there, and he challenges some of like the leaders of different nations and stuff.
Whoa,
and of course,
cool.
it's Stephen Fry, so his brain is going to like destroy theirs. And I love it. So yeah, if you want
cool.
something you can find right now, go and watch Out There on YouTube.
Cool.
Nice.
Awesome. All right, Brian, take us home.
All right. So I finally, a movie that a friend had lent to me 20 years ago, and I just got around to watching the other day. Charade with
Oh, it's so good.
Cary Grant and Audrey
Brian,
Hepburn. Yeah,
welcome.
Yeah. It was so much fun. I love North by Northwest, and I feel like of every movie I've seen, it's most similar to North by Northwest in that it's kind of a hybrid comedy and comedy thriller almost, where it's like there's a lot of jokes and a lot of funny moments, but also you're like, oh, but this is a real tense scene and it has a real plot to it. And so it's just a really fun, entertaining movie. But I think one thing that's really cool from a screenwriting perspective, it's funny because we've been talking about exposition lately, and there are scenes where it's just the exposition is two people sitting in a room talking, and you're kind of like, but also you're like, oh, this is 1960, but it's like that was normal back then. But the cool thing from a screenwriting perspective is every time you as the audience get some new information, Audrey Hepburn gets that information like within the next scene. And it's actually kind of nice because it takes away the frustration you get sometimes from a movie of like wishing that somebody knew something, instead of being like, oh, if only this person knew this, everything would be fixed. And that's a really easy way to make films interesting. But I think what I like about this movie is that every time we find out something, she finds it out too, which forces the film, forces the story to go, okay, now what's next? What's the next step in this progression?
The thing that's so unique about that movie is the number of switches.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like you get new information, you think you know the score, then Audrey Hepburn gets it, you're like, okay, we're all on the same page. But because she knows exactly what you're saying, she forces it into something else.
Right.
There's probably 8 switches.
At least, yeah.
At least in that movie where you don't have any idea, where you get fed another story, she gets fed another story, and you're like, do I believe this? I don't know. I've had 6 switches so far. Why would I believe this one more than the next one? But it's all I have to go on, so I might as well.
Yeah. And it forces the audience to also question everything.
Yeah,
you're like,
it's
well,
great.
maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Holds up.
All right. Well, hope you've enjoyed this conversation about Inglourious Basterds and lots of other things. We could probably talk about the movie and Tarantino forever, and we will talk about more Tarantino soon. But yes, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to everyone that supports the podcast on Patreon. Thank you to everyone that's tweeted at us and left comments on the YouTube channel. It's been really fun getting to engage with you guys. Yeah, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon if you're enjoying it. And we will see you in the next episode.
Au revoir, Michel.
Shoshana?
No, it's Michael.
Oh, Michel.
Okay.
When I was in France, I made my parents call me Michel.
No, you didn't.
Just a little bit.